Did you give your, you need to give your phone to, okay. Let's see. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. Let's see if I get this right. My name is Michael Rooks. I'm the Wieland Family Curator of Contemporary and Modern Art at the High Museum, and it's a privilege to welcome you here tonight. I want to give a special thanks to our members and all of you in the audience who make what we do meaningful and give purpose to what we do. So thanks for coming and joining us tonight for the Artist Talk this evening. I'd like to extend a special thanks to special guests. I don't know if they're here yet, but Consul General Young Jun Kim of Korea and Consul Jae Yang will be joining us as well this evening. So special thanks to the consulate. Our guest tonight is Jaye Rhee, sitting to my right.
Hello. Thanks for the introduction.
And Jaye is perhaps best known for her video work, but she is also an artist whose practice includes photography and installation and performance. Her 4-channel video, I hope you've all seen, has been in our collection gallery since last October. It's called Tear, and it's been on view since October. We've moved it recently to the Wieland Skyway, and you'll be able to see it after the talk tonight if you use your ticket stub to get into the museum, top floor of the Wieland Skyway. Since we have had it on view, it's become a favorite among our audience members, from toddlers to their grandparents. And I don't know, Derek, if you can hear me, did you get that photograph I sent you? Derek, maybe not. We've done these classes with toddlers who were trying to reproduce Jaye's video. Anyway, there it is. Isn't that cool? That's the right response. It was supposed to be an ah moment, so thank you. Born in Seoul, South Korea, Jaye splits her time, I think, still between New York and Seoul, or spends most of your time in New York. That's where you're based. And like me, you completed both your undergraduate and graduate work at the School of the Art Institute in Chicago. You've also studied at the Skowhegan School of Painting, which is interesting for a media artist and performative artist. And your many distinctions include the Sangyeon Award, the CAAA residency in Portugal. That is the, I won't say it in Portuguese, but the, what is this?
Is it Center for Art and Architecture Affairs?
Thank you. The Center for Art and Architecture Affairs in Portugal. The Dosan Foundation Yang Kang Art Award, the SEMA Award from the Seoul Museum of Art. And many others, including the Arts Council of Korea, the Palais de Tokyo, Skowhegan School, and the Changdong International Artist Studio Foundation. Jaye has also had solo exhibitions at the Texas State University and Colgate University Galleries, the Center for Art and Architecture Affairs in Portugal, we just mentioned, and commercial galleries in Seoul, New York, Paris, and in Los Angeles. And your work, Jaye's work, has been included in group exhibitions across Europe, Asia, and North America at venues like the Seoul Museum of Art, the Mori Museum in Tokyo, the Albright Knox Museum, and others. In fact, it was after I saw Tear installed at the Albright Knox Museum in Buffalo when I became determined to acquire it for the Art Museum here in Atlanta. And if you can get your hands on it, Jaye is also the subject of a monograph, titled Imageless. So our mutual friend, Carol Becker, who used to be the dean at the Art Institute in Chicago, now she's the dean of faculty at Columbia University, once summed your work up concisely, and I think this really does sum it up beautifully as reaching for the sublime. And you do that through your deployment of honest and simple means. And if you know Tear, you know what I'm talking about. I've taught a stretched piece of fabric through which Jaye essentially performs the work. But using these very modest, simple means, you're able to allow us to suspend our disbelief in the power of transcendence. And I think that's, for me, an important part of your work. So again, please help me welcome Jaye.
Hello. Thank you for the great introduction.
Absolutely.
And I'm so honored to be here in this beautiful museum. And I saw my work here, and I thought, oh my God, it's great in this museum. The artwork really matters in this space, I think. So
Thank you.
great.
Yeah, I really love the installation of it here and the adjacencies.
Yeah.
So this is, I was kidding around, this is our studio visit. Jaye, I love that story. You can, if you want to tell it, but we were supposed to have a studio visit long ago.
Yeah. I mean, 20 years ago, I was in school at the University of Chicago.
20.
And Michael Rooks was a curator at MCA. And it was a day that he come to visit for a critic for the MFA students. And we only had a 10 slot, or maybe less. I don't even remember how many, but it was almost like everybody, all the MFA students had to do the lottery to meet him. And of course, everybody wants to get the spot, but most of them couldn't. And just one of those lucky and blessed, less than 10 people got his studio visit, and I was one of the guys who was almost like crying and then looking at, oh, that's Mike Rooks.
So this is our studio visit.
Oh, and 20 years later, this magic happens.
Well, thank you for being here, and I love that we are ships passing in the night in Chicago, but we actually met each other in Seoul last year and had a good time meeting people, artists, colleagues at the Asian Art Biennial.
Yes.
So, but we had already acquired Tear, which is on view. Do you want to talk about Tear? What we're going to do is we're going to watch two videos. One is an excerpt, and the excerpt will include images of each individual frame of a 4-channel video, as well as installation shots of the video. And then we'll watch the entire duration of a relatively new piece a little bit later, and we'll talk about each one. But did you want to talk about Tear first, or?
Oh, maybe we can watch the Flesh in the Book, and then we kind of talk back and forth. No?
Okay. So the first video, the excerpt I mentioned is called The Flesh and the Blood.
Flesh
And the Book.
Yeah.
Pardon me. Flesh and the Book, which is a curious title, and maybe we'll talk about it after we watch the video. Do you want to set it up, the video for us, or have I already done that for you?
Yeah, they already did it.
Okay. So we'll watch the video, and then we'll continue.
Yeah.
In my first year in New York, and
So that's the flesh in the book, and a lot to talk about. First, well, maybe I'll let you talk, because I've been doing a lot of talking, but you collaborated with a number of different people with this piece.
Yeah, with this piece, I mean, first the dancers. Before this piece, I had another work, notes, that's similar to this. The reason why I wanted to show this piece was that when, from the time that I made a tear, I always wanted to work with the space that we lose when we shoot the video, because in digital media is relatively flat. Nowadays it's ultra flat, in the computer, but we lose the space, and I always wanted to because if we lose one sensibility, like space, the sensibility of space, but then we gain other thing. Maybe we gain like how to trace, how to imagine space, and with the flash in the book, I really wanted to show the invisible space with the movement. When you look at the dancer, if they have to move that much, and if they have to make that much movement, they have to have a certain space. So each line has about 2 meters apart, and the first line is about like 2 feet high, and it's gradually higher. So I shot in larger space with in very spacious spaces, and these dancers are like former Morris Cunningham dancers, and one of the women are the Yvonne Rainer dancers, but she also danced with Morris too. Yeah,
So you were making your while you're trying to demonstrate the space, sort of the space that the dancers are working within. You're also exaggerating the flatness of the space by creating this staff, so that it almost looks like they're dancing on these staff lines like notes.
Yes. So you have to just follow their movement and just reimagine the space.
And so Merce Cunningham dancers, former Merce Cunningham dancers, because when you made it, Cunningham Dance Company had just
disbanded.
Disbanded,
Yeah.
Right, and one of Yvonne Rainer's dancers as well.
Yeah.
Who did you collaborate with on the sound? That was Elliot?
Elliot Sharp. I collaborated with Elliot Sharp for the former piece, Notes, and for this piece, I asked him to record the string.
It's like a sitar?
No, I mean he has many instrument.
Right.
So I just asked him to record like any sound that he can make with his string instrument. It has to be the string instrument. So he made and he gave me like more than 100 files. And I was like, no, this is not what I want. But I went through all these sounds, and it's almost like, oh, this sounds, it sounds like a bell, and sometimes, I mean, it doesn't really, you can't really tell this sound was made from this string instrument.
Yeah.
And I selected, the sound, and I put this sound whenever this dancer touches the string, or I see the movement of strings, and that was the basic of a method, method of making this piece.
But that sound was done in post-production, right? Or
Yeah.
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 While I'm editing video. Yeah.
But you alluded to the earlier piece called Notes.
Yeah.
Or Note. Yeah.
Notes.
Notes.
Yeah.
Plural, which is related to this in the imagery and the
Yeah.
use of the rubber bands that we see that create the musical staff.
Mm-hmm.
But in that piece, the time, you're no longer using actual time. It's not like real time. Rather,
Yeah.
it's sped up,
It's sped
right?
up, yes.
And so, what led from Notes and your investigation of this spatial investigation, but also investigation of body and movement in that piece to Flesh in the Book?
Well, the notes, when I worked on the notes, what is signified and what is signifier was more important. You know, it's notes and human body, you know, like juxtaposing like notes and human body, and the word itself was important. Like, oh, it looks, I mean, not really a look, but okay, let's put it this way. For note, flatness was more important, but the flesh in the book, the space is more important.
Right. And for Notes, was it a bit of a play on words? Because Notes also,
Yes,
when I see
that's
Notes,
what it
I
is.
think
Yes.
of taking notes.
Yes, yes. And when they perform, I mean, I know because it's my piece, but people don't really see it. But they start with wearing glasses. They start perform after wearing glasses.
And then,
Yeah.
so tell us about the title of The Flesh in the Book, because it's kind of a provocative title.
Yeah.
Or curious title.
Yeah, yeah. When I first tried to meet dancers and find dancers for the piece, okay, I admire the Merce Cunningham dancers, and I love their geometries, but I could not really. I mean, Merce Cunningham Dance Company was disbanded, so I mean, I went to many different concerts, dance concerts, and I even took like workshops. But I'm not a dancer, or like I don't have like education of dance, and so my approach to dance was through the book, and I learned through the book.
Like the history of dance through
like
dance notation.
Reading books.
Yeah.
So, but dance itself is very physical, and when I worked with dancers, everything was, I mean, things that I didn't expect came up. For example, like I even went to this organization called Career Changes for Dancers, and I asked them, oh yeah, so I'm looking for retired dancers.
Looking for retired dancers.
Yeah, and they said, no, dancers never retire. Because it's more like identity. And I was like, oh my God, I made a big mistake. And things that I learned while I'm looking for dancers and while I'm working with dancers, it was something that I couldn't learn from the book. So, this title came from The Flesh in the Book. And also, that it's like I took this words also from the Mallarmé's poem. Uh, Flesh is said, I've read all the books. So, yeah.
Yeah, it was, sorry, I did a little homework. Brice Marine?
Yeah,
Marine.
Marine.
And the quote is, both the flesh and the spirit weary me. I'm no longer in love, and I've read all my books.
Yes.
So it seems a little sad.
Well,
But
yeah.
is it more about curiosity and the desire for more,
Yeah.
right?
And also this whole word that Mallarmé wants to find, to grab was the only book,
Right.
yeah.
So what got you into dancing, and what made you become interested in dancers, especially classical or rather modern Western dance?
Well, I did many performance-based video, like Curator, and that was the beginning of a work that I start to become aware of the body movements.
And Tyr is you
Yes.
performing the piece.
Yes. I mean, yeah. I just started to do it by myself, and then, and I moved to naturally move to like, dance.
And it's important, your interest in dance is important given the next video we're going to watch in the entirety, which is called The Perfect Moment, which was completed 2 years ago? Or
I think it's 3.
it was
4,
relatively,
yeah, 3, 4,
was it 3 or 4 years ago?
Yeah.
Do you want to, shall we watch it and talk about it?
Yeah,
wanna-
let's watch it and talk about it.
Okay. Derek, I think we're ready for the next video, please. There we go.
In my first year in New York in 1968, I went to see lots of performances. I was a young choreographer, so partly I was just really interested in seeing the work and being inspired and seeing what was going on. But also I was checking out venues because I had this idea in the back of my mind that I would eventually show my own work. And every Sunday in the New York Times Arts and Leisure section, I'd see advertised that this guy, Charles Weidman, who was a famous figure in traditional modern dance, was performing at a place called Theater for the Two Arts in Chelsea in 23-something Street, I don't remember. But I didn't really want to go because I wasn't interested in that old stuff. I was really just interested in what was happening now. So I didn't go for a long time, but finally in the spring, and mostly the reason I went was to check out the venue. I made a reservation and I went to a matinee. And I remember it was a beautiful sunny day, it was in April. And I got there early and paid for my ticket, went to N, and Theater for the Two Arts was just this skinny rectangle of a loft, a kind of old loft. And there was only room for like maybe 15, 20 folding chairs on one end. And at the other end was the performing area. And there was sort of pretty sorry-looking black drapes covering the windows and kind of creating an entrance. And I was just 23 years old. And so I was the first person. So I took my program, I sat down, and I was looking at my program, and I was looking at my program for a while. And all of a sudden, the lights went down, and I realized, to my horror, that I was the only person in the audience. And Mr. Weidman came out and did the entire show for me. This was an overwhelming experience. My responsibility as the sole audience member weighed so heavily on me. Here was this famous old guy dancing, and here was me, just this young girl. And I was so aware if I screeched my chair or rustled my program or cleared my throat. And sometimes I wasn't really even sure when to start to applaud because I wasn't always sure when he was finished. Because he wasn't, these were like famous solos of his. And I remember this one, I think it was called Cathedral something. And it was more like him remembering him doing the solos than really doing it fully. So sometimes I wasn't really sure where the pause was. So that experience was so intense. And, on the one hand, it was very inspiring. It was very inspiring that this guy still had that much passion and drive, that he was going to give his all and do it, as fully as he could for even just this one silly girl in the audience. But on the other hand, it was just so sad, really. This was this, rundown place, and here was this famous guy, and, made me think about, modern dance, what does it give you? In the end, you don't have very much. But, on the other hand, as I said, it was really, really, really inspiring. So inspiring that he still had to do it. He still just really had to do it. I remember when I did my first concert at Judson Church in 1970. I was pretty ballsy. Who in the hell did I think I was? I hadn't danced in a major company, and that was the typical entree. First you dance in a major company, and then you show your own choreography, but I hadn't done that. But there I was at Judson Church, which was, at that time, an historic place for new dance, and it was opening night. And in this concert, I had an improvisation we did. I had 7 other dancers, including me, in this concert. And we did an improvisation as the audience was coming in. It lasted about 20 minutes. And I had certain prompts we did, but the most set thing was the ending, how we ended it. And we did it with this rhythm that went 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And we did it 4 times. The first time we didn't say anything. The second time, on count 5 in the 9-count phrase, we said Judson. On the third one, when we got to that moment, we went church. And on the last one, we didn't do anything on 5, but on 6, 7, 8, 9, as we walked out, we went, amen, amen, amen. It was sort of my little acknowledgement that we were doing this in a church, even though it was a venue known for experimental dance. So it went like this. Judson. And on 6, 7, 8, 9, we would always walk. So we improvised in between, and then we would walk. And I think one of the reasons I remember this so well is, first of all, I'm really rhythmic, so I remember rhythms. But it also was, it was the beginning of the concert, and I'm putting myself out there. And it was going to happen, and now it was going to start. Later on in that concert, in the second act, there was a piece called Bleecker to West 80th Street, and it had 2 parts. A solo I did, first the group section for 5 dancers, and then a solo I did called subtitled Entrance. And the sound score was subway sounds. I loved doing this solo. I loved the movement in it, and there were a couple moments that really stand out to me in that experience. For some reason that night, I was just so on. There's no feeling like it when you have that feeling. It feels like you're really, really present tense. But one of the movements I really, really liked was, and I actually stole it and used it in other dances later on because I liked it so much. I called it the cat movement. You stand, you're in first position turned out, and I was facing the down right corner when I did it in this particular piece. And your arms are at your side, and you lift your right shoulder sharply, and then you shove it down. At the same time, you look over your right shoulder, your left leg goes into passe, and your left arm goes out to second with the palm forward. Then you sharply lift the right arm to meet the left one in the line, and you extend the left leg and point the foot. And all that's done like, and shum ba ba, you know, they were sharp movements, da doom da da. And then the quality completely changes, and you relax the elbows and the hands, and you bring the arms through, and they do this kind of wave-like motion, and the hands kind of paint the space. And as the arms come through, you turn the leg in, the hip kind of goes up, and you go into parallel, and you plie on the standing leg, and you flex the left foot, and you kind of arch your lower back. And so it was this really kind of gooey, sensual moment that I really liked after cha, boom, bam, bam, then ah. And I just loved doing that movement. There was another another thing that I really remember, and a particular moment that I really remember. You know, this dance, even though there was this ambient sound of subway, it mostly was in silence, you know. And when you dance in silence, you feel particularly naked because the audience is watching you and they have nothing else to attend to. So you feel very seen, very watched. And I had rehearsed this song because I was so nervous about doing this concert, and part of me was thinking, you're not even entitled to do a concert like this, but you're doing it anyway. So I had rehearsed these 2 solo segments I had in my evening of 5 dances a gazillion times. You know? So I was really kind of nervous about it. So there were a couple of really difficult balances in it. And so in this one moment, I don't remember what the movement was before. I don't remember that. But I just know that I ended up facing a corner at the end of this movement. And there was some way, I think I kind of like brushed one leg forward and then swung it through. I don't know if swang is really the right word, but swung it through. And as I did that, I rounded my back, kind of threw my back down and around in a curve, and turned my body over to then stand on that same standing leg in releve. I think the other leg was in a flexed foot front attitude, and my arms were in the shape of a W. And usually when I did that movement, I'd do this strong energy, and I would suspend, and then I go the next thing. But this particular night, opening night, when I did that movement, I hit this perfect balance. It was so unbelievable. I remember I almost smiled to myself as it happened because I was completely planted and I was hovering and I was just completely there. And I could have stayed there forever. It was the most amazing feeling, like just an incredible feeling of just being there. And it was the way the whole dance had felt that night, just like I had just thought of the movements that moment and just did them. And everything just happened exactly the way I wanted, you know. It was just, it felt perfect. That's how it felt.
So that's such a beautiful piece.
Yeah.
And
In my first year in New York in
we learned
1968.
we learned the title of the piece comes at the end of her narration. So maybe can we talk about the narrative and then structure?
Yeah. After I worked with after I finished making the flesh in the book, because I met many dancers, not just the masculine dancers. I mean, that's something. I happened to meet Robert Swinston on the street.
Smithson,
Robert Swinston,
Swinston.
yeah, who
You
was
have to be
the
like a
Merce-
ghost. Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, and he introduced me to other, Merce dancers. But before that, I met many dancers, like 70, 80, I don't remember. And with all this failure, approaching dancers by asking if you are retired. So.
Why was it important for dancers who were mature and who had a lot of
Because I
experience?
wanted to work with older dancers who has this, because our body is our history, because when we think of like ballet, for example, you expect a very young body, and you want to see something like young and beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to make a piece with mature dancers. So anyway, I met with many dancers, and one day I thought, well, what makes me keep making artwork? It's because what art, the biggest reward is that you have this moment of something that you only know, but it's perfect. It's just, everything's just right, and this piece is done. But that's something you don't share it with others in visual art. But these dancers, because they do it in live, and they have this moment directly with the viewers.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought I should make this piece, and I wanted to make this piece about that moment that we all have, like a visual artist or like all these artists have and everyone else have, but with dancers, because they have this moment, they know it, and maybe the viewers know it, but it's gone. Because visual artist, it's difficult to make it with a video,
And you set that up in the beginning of the piece, obviously with her first story of this kind of a trilogy of stories. The first story of experiencing that performance as the only audience member. So that connection between dancer and the audience was emphasized.
But that came after. And I had this plan for this piece, but my plan was interview many dancers. So I had like a 12 dancers on my list. And I have a plan to interview them and have some young dancer doing the any movement, so here, there, and people will kind of justify it by themselves.
Yeah.
So I have this plan, and in my brain, I thought it was okay. This piece is done. But one day, so I had planned to shoot these interviews. I had all these different dates for different dancers, and one day I got the phone call at night from her, Pat Catterson.
Pat Harrison is her name?
Yeah, Pat Catterson.
Catterson.
And she said, "Oh, I cannot do this interview because I sprained my toe." It was like 11:30, almost 12 o'clock, and her voice was shaking. It was a very sad voice. I was like, "Are you okay?" And I asked her, "Are you okay?" And she said, "Oh yeah, I'm okay, but I sprained toe. I cannot. My doctor told me I cannot dance anymore." And that was moments that I thought, she's like 70-something years old, and she danced all her life, and I just thought, am I going to be like this too, you know? Maybe, yeah? Because like I said, I mean, like I learned that if you're a dancer, you die as a dancer. It's like identity. And I just, so I said, well, that's okay. I mean, you know, if you need anything, I'll just come see you. But then I had to find other dancers. But I have like a variety of dancers. So if she's out of this piece, then I have to find other one who can go with other dancers well. So I had to postpone with my schedule. And while I was looking for other dancers, I visited her. And because I visited a couple times, it becomes like several times, it becomes like 7, 8, 9, 10. And one day she started really talking about herself. And whenever I meet her, after that evening, I start to write based on her true story, you know, that it's all her experience, but it's scripted. And some parts that she explains about her movement, and I said, can you explain your movement that you did there? And that some parts I recorded, and I transcribe it at home. And just, you know, and I start to write this text and doing this text collage, you know?
Yeah.
And I spent like that was almost winter, so like 3-4 months. And I had this other interview set it up already, but before the shoot. One day I just realized the script is ready. And this is what it is.
Yeah.
So
Perfect moment.
Yes. And I went to see her and asked her again, well, you know, I mean, because then she felt better after several months. We can just shoot upper body, you know, upper torso, so don't even, I mean, can we shoot? I have this script ready. And she felt better, but by then, so she said, yes, well, let's do it, you know, it's just because I cannot practice dance, so we'll find the time to do it. So I set the shooting day, like 3-4 days before the shoot. I don't even remember exactly, but maybe 5 days but before the shoot, she called me very happily and said, oh, my doctor told me sprained toe. She had to do the surgery before, but then my doctor told me I don't have to have the surgeries and I can dance again. So,
Great.
and so she memorized all this script, and then she did this piece. When I shoot this piece, she was so happy, you know, all this face expression, everything was so real because she was so happy that she can dance again.
That's great.
So that's this perfect moment happened right there when I shoot. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it really conveys that story you just told is beautifully conveyed in her narrative, which in the structure of the piece, it's really interesting because it's split screen. I don't know if you intended to be single channel with split screen or multiple, it's single channel.
It's a multi-channel. It's
Okay.
projected on each corner.
Okay.
One should project it larger. The young dancer doing the movement should project it larger, and the one a little smaller than that. It's either projected in both corner or the facing each other.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
But the use of dark, of black, no image with sound is really wonderful. And then the two images, when they're juxtaposed, for me, represent two different tenses. She talks about present tense, and
Yes.
so it seems like the piece exists in both present,
Yes.
past, and future tense. The young dancer
Yes.
sort of reproducing or reactivating or reacting, redancing the piece. It seems like the future tense in a way, and so we've got these different shifts
Yes.
between tenses,
Yeah.
which is really a wonderful
Yeah.
use of, to me, the kind of idea of either split screen or multiple screen, multiple channel.
Yeah.
Was that something that was important to you in terms of just kind of setting up these kind of generational perspectives?
Yes, the tense, the past tense and future tense and present was very important when I did this. When I edit these two pieces, two channels
Yeah.
together.
And also, I think the idea of the recreation of a piece is really interesting. The idea of something historical that is then recreated, and something, when it's recreated, cannot possibly be what it was, that perfect moment,
Yeah.
but it is in and of itself its
Yes.
own thing that can
Yes.
have the potential for
Yeah.
this perfection, right?
Yes.
Because we saw the dancer, the young dancer, who was she trying to interpret what the other dancer was narrating, or was she being directed?
I shot separately, but I gave her this script too. So I shot her doing the very literal interpretation of the movement, the scripted and described movement in her version, and also editing. So it's just.
So that was a beautiful kind of transliteration of what we were
Yes.
hearing in the narrative, to see on the other channel or on the other screen this interpretation, which had its own inherent beauty and integrity, but yet was connected to this moment in the past.
Yeah, but it's not perfectly.
In sync.
It's unsynced.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why do you think it is? I mean, obviously, dancers and performers have an audience, and the audience applauds. They respond immediately, and so that's easy for maybe not easy, but perhaps there's a direct channel to acknowledging that moment.
Yeah.
For visual artists, you said it's not the same. How do you mean?
Yeah, but we have artist talk.
That's right.
Yeah, but we have artist talk, and
Is it more personal? I mean, as a failed painter, I know that I kind of think I understand that moment in the studio where it's like it feels so right.
Yeah. It's just right.
And is it more meaningful? Maybe perhaps in your piece, to me it would seem so meaningful to Patricia.
Pat.
Pat.
Yeah, Pat.
To hear her say she just wanted to smile because
Yeah.
it meant so much to her.
Yeah. But that somehow that perfectness,
Yeah.
or the happiness that she's feeling in the piece, was not 100% because of her story. It's because her tone, her advice. I mean, it's just,
She was.
Yes.
She was remembering something,
Yeah.
and with the understanding that she can still dance.
Yes.
Essentially, yeah.
Yes.
Remembering a special moment.
Yeah.
So, what's the next project? We should take some questions from anyone in the audience soon. But I know you've been working on a project in Arizona.
Yeah.
It's another multi-channel video, or is it? Oh, is it secret?
Yeah, I don't know yet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That's something. Yeah, I don't know. It's performance. It's there's a chorus, there's a performance, there's video, there's installation, there's some object making.
When do you know? I mean, I don't mean to be like stupid, but you know what I mean? Because you're in your studio and you're doing in post-production, doing all this stuff. So when do you know it's what the shape and form of the piece will be?
Well, I know certain things, and I don't know everything. But art, making itself makes art. So it's almost like I'm in this space, dark space.
Literally.
Yeah, just touching things and figuring things out. And one moment light up, and so it's done. Yeah.
And we're grateful.
Yes.
And you have a show coming up at the Seoul Museum of Art,
Yes.
and other projects, shows coming up include.
What do I? Yeah, I have shows in Seoul Museum of Art this November, and October I have shows in Art Center in Bari, Italy.
In Bari.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
I didn't. It's beautiful place.
Beautiful, great food.
Yeah, I want to go, but I cannot go.
Wow. All right. So I think it's a good time to take any questions anyone might have. And Yema, do we have a mic or? Okay. There's a question in the center, the gentleman.
Hi, how you doing? I'm Kyle. Thank you for the talk. I love the tear piece, and I also really enjoyed the piece I saw today. My one question, I have many questions, but I guess the one that matters. Would you also consider yourself like a movement artist, like outside of your multimedia capabilities? Because the tear piece, that is you in the piece, correct? Yeah. Because it seems like you're interested from like the first piece we saw and the second piece, and this idea of like being behind the camera, but also in front of the camera, and like this idea of like play and practice. So I'm just curious, do you consider yourself a spectator or also a movement artist?
Well, yeah, it's very, very good question, I think. You have to be both. Yeah. I think I'm both. I have to be in front of camera and also outside of camera. I have to be the director and also the performer. Because even if you are shooting you're shooting something like like dancers or like like Yoda stuff, your friends, or even if you have actors or actresses, you have to know their feeling. Without knowing them, without that understanding, you can't shoot it. You can't make a piece. So you're in front of the camera at the same time behind the camera.
So as you're directing behind the camera, are you, is it both empathizing with and also actually physically directing movement and?
Yeah. Yes.
But also sort of feeling it.
Yes. Yes.
And another question. Yes.
Like for example, there I have someone holding the camera. Basically, camera was in the cherry picker, but somebody was holding the camera. It depends on the piece. But yes, I do have somebody. No, when you perform, you are the director and you are the actor. You're, yeah. Yes.
But Tear was also, I believe, one of the first, if not the first, video piece you made. There were
Yeah.
other video works that you
Yeah,
made.
other
but-
video works, but yeah, that's the.
And also
very
video work of
beginning
certain production value.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
and from Tear, the production value of work continues to get
Yeah,
higher and higher and more finished, meaning
Yes.
just,
yes. Yeah.
you know, in terms of equipment
Mhm.
and the presentation and also the output, the outcome.
Yeah. I mean, for Tear, I just wanted to make something that's for video, because you do video, but then I mean, if you shoot some live thing in the video, but then becomes documentation, but I wanted to make something that's like sculpture,
Mhm.
something like it's done and it exists as a video, it exists as digital media, but it's done. It's just like a sculpture.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
I love Tear too, in addition to Seesaw, which is a piece that came later,
Yeah.
because they both employ theatrical devices.
Yes, yeah.
So the theater, whether it's dance or the theater, seem to have play an important role in your video work.
Yeah, and also like at the perfect moment or the ones called future, these things are not I'm not interested in documentary, although I document things, but it's more like theater is important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, light.
Yeah, I had this score, basic score, but in between the basic score, I just run my camera so they can kind of move freely. So I ran the cameras for a long time.